second threshold is where someone moves from indifferent to curious. The first threshold is pretty straightforward: build trust with people. The second threshold is where many friendships get stuck. I can have a friend trust me to a high degree and yet not become curious about my faith. There's a myth that if I am a loving and kind Christian, then my non-Christian friends will become curious about my faith automatically and will ask me questions about God. That almost never happens. Take Bob, for example. Bob is friends with everybody in his dorm. He's social, he's kind, he's outgoing. He's a great Christian guy. He has meals with people, he plays sports with people. But nobody is curious about his faith. No one asks him questions about what Jesus means to him. They trust him, they are just indifferent about faith. They've already crossed the first threshold, but they're stuck at the second threshold with Bob. How about you? Do you know this feeling of frustration where you get stuck at the trust threshold and it never goes any further than that? Jesus is the master at instigating curiosity in the complacent people around him. Let's look at his approach in the Gospels. Did you know Jesus is asked about 200 questions in the 4 Gospels, and he seldom answers them with an answer? Jesus didn't have very many Q&A sessions. He had a lot of Q and Q sessions. He answered questions with questions. He asks, "What do you want me to do for you? Who do you say that I am? What are you looking for?" These are unnerving questions that help indifferent people become curious. Questions open up the mind and soul as they create uneasiness over my complacency and unexamined assumptions about life. Jesus is more committed to the awakening process in someone's mind than he is to satisfying with the quick answer. Let's become more like Jesus. Let's become better question askers. Everybody needs a starter question that they can use in a conversation and help nudge curiosity. It has to be a question that you like to ask and that fits your personality. Let me give you some examples. I have a friend named Dave. Dave's favorite question is, why? One time, he's at Starbucks and the barista says to him, "How are you?" He says, "Pretty good." And then he asks her, "How about you?" She says, "Fine." He says, "Why?" She pauses, looks at him, and then she says, "Actually, I'm not fine. My husband left me last night. I'm miserable." He says, "Can you take a break? I'd like to hear some more." He had an amazing moment to minister to this woman, all because he asked his favorite question, why? Another friend, Gabe, his favorite question is, "What's your story?" He asks it to a lot of people, whether he's known them for a few minutes or for a longer time. "What's your story?" And they start to tell him their story. And then 10 minutes later, they say back to him, "Well, what's your story?" And part of his story is how he fell in love with Jesus. And that opens up incredible conversations. Each of my friends has a different question that helps them start conversations. I recommend that everyone has 2 questions that you like. One that gets the conversation started, and a follow-up question that keeps the conversation going. Here are some basic questions that might work for you. Do you have any faith background? What does that mean for you today? Have you ever been to church? What's your experience with Christians? Number 3 is a question someone asked me during my freshman year in college. They said to me, "Doug, every thinking person owes it to themselves to form an adult opinion about Jesus. Have you had the chance to form an adult opinion about Jesus?" I said, "No, I haven't. I would love a place to do that. Is there a place that would allow me to ask my questions?" They said, "Yeah, come to our small group Bible study." So I invested my time and energy into figuring out who Jesus is. And to my utter surprise, within about 3 weeks, Jesus had lit my brain on fire with some of his questions. He was jumping off the page, and I even said, "Who's been hiding Jesus from me?" It was a catalyst on my journey toward Jesus. Our questions help them discover for themselves what they think, what they feel. What are they looking for in life? Take a few minutes, think about a question that you can ask that flows naturally from your personality, and then how you can pair that with the follow-up question to help people discover for themselves, and along the way, instigate curiosity in them. Your challenge this week is to go and drop one good question into one conversation. It may work brilliantly. It may not work that well at all, but try something. See how it goes.